Greetings to Africans on the continent and greetings to Africans around the world. This is King H. I'm making another video because I came across another intriguing article, and the title of the article reads Akon, France depends on Africa to survive. Akon, the artist, the rapper, the Senegalese American rapper, made a bold statement that France depends on Africa to survive. I believe that France depends on Africa to survive, but I want to ask all Africans on the continent, do you believe that France depends completely on the countries they colonize to survive? Because ever since they came to Africa, they have been exploiting Africa for their own benefits, for their own survival. But what do Africans think? Do they think that France depends on surviving on the backbones of the African people? Because if you believe that, then we as Africans must do something to end this continuous suffering in the hands of France. France wants to live the better life, the well-organized life, the rich, resourceful life. And so they exploit Africa, and they use Africans to survive. That's how they make their money. That's how France makes the money. And which is why you could see after 300 years, French African nations can thrive because all the resources is taken out, is exploited by France. France get rich, Africa stays poor. So that link needs to be cut off. And the only way to cut that link is when the people of Congo, of Cameroon, of Ivory Coast, of Niger, of Burkina Faso, of Mali, Senegal, Chad, Guinea, Burundi, Benin, Togo, Central African Republic, Gabon, the people must rise up against the government that has been handpicked by France to facilitate their lifestyle, to facilitate them to get rich, while the people of Africa suffer, while the people of Africa feel the pains. How often have you had an aunt, an uncle, or sister, cousin, or relative is dying because you don't have the money to sustain their health? How often? Why do you think that happens? Why do you think that many African nations or many French African nations do not have the institution, the better health institution to keep their people healthy? It's because the wealth in those countries have been sucked out like vampires by the government of France, who are supported by the presidents, the leaders of Africa, have been assimilated into the Francophone or the French system, whereby they have to keep pumping the wealth to France. But let me say something. Look at what is happening in France. Look at the protests that is happening in France. The people of France are protesting They're on strike because the government of France wants to lift the pension from 62 to 64. And for a whole month now, there has been a serious protest. You see, people who are in France retire at the age of 62 and receive that pension till the day they die, enjoying their life because they have worked for what, 30 something years. But we have people in countries like Togo, like Cameroon, or Chad or Guinea. Our fathers and grandfathers work for the rest of their life and still do not see anything. Why is that? They don't even see their own pension. Why is that? Because the wealth of French African nations have been sucked into this humongous nation you call France. That just keep. It's like a vampire drinking blood. It never stops. You know what you have to do to the vampire in order for them to stop drinking blood? Kill the goddamn vampire or cut it loose. Make sure that the vampire cannot drink no more from you, or you just be the food. We Africans are backwards because of France. We Africans suffer because of France, and the people of France will fight to make sure that they get their own share. So why can't French Africa wake up? 90% of France's wealth comes out of Africa. So just imagine that we fight against our government. French African nations, we fight against our government. We start a protest, a revolution, a Pan-African revolution to stop this nonsense, this jargon, this fucked up institution that has been put in place by France to benefit France. Just imagine that our people rise from Ivory Coast, from French Cameroon, to fight President Paul Biya and his institution. President Paul Biya has been there for 30 something years. What can he say he has done to improve the nation? Nothing. And you could see that in almost every French African nation. Why? Because the vampire called France keeps sucking all their resources. We need to stop France. And in order to stop France, we need to stop people who are supporting France. The presidents, the leaders, the government institutions in the French African nations. That's what the people must rise and kick out the leadership that supports France. Any leadership in Africa that supports France, that's in favor of France, needs to go. Needs to go, because France will not stop unless we stop France. And that is what the people of France are doing to the government of France. Because the government of France has decided to raise their pension age to 64. And for the past month, they have been fighting to make sure that will not change. They want to enjoy their life in an age where, after working for 30 something years, they can enjoy being still young. Don't want to be old before you enjoy. So 60, 62, and you're not working and you're receiving pension, good amount of money every month. You could do whatever you want to do. But where do you think France gets the money to pay those people? Where do you think France gets those money to pay French citizens their pension at the age of 62 to like what, 100 years? at most. Also for 62, add another like 38 years. Where do you think France get that money from? Do you think they work for it? No, it's the resources, the finances that is available in French African nations. That's where they benefit. That's where they get the money, which is why our people will continue to suffer. Our people will continue to suffer day in, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40, 50, 67. Nothing will change unless the people say enough is enough. France must go. Unless the people say enough is enough, France must go. Everything that has to do with France or has a name that spells French, anything that has to support the French government in Africa must go. If the people don't put this, because in order for any revolution to begin, it starts from the mind. People must think it through their thoughts and act through their thoughts. You start see the action. But so long as people are not thinking it, so long as people like in Cameroon where they drink and don't even think about tomorrow. All the suffering, they're suffering, yes, but at the end of the day they have to go to a bar and drink until when they get up they do the same thing over and over. But that's true. Their plight never changes because they're not thinking. They're not looking at the world from a different perspective, seeing what affects French African nations, see what affects African nations, Western powers, Western influences. So Africa, we must wake up. We must kick France. France is one of the Western nations that we must get rid of. Out of France. We must ban France from doing business in any African nation. Ban them from doing business in any French African nations and in any African nation, being it French or not. We need to cut that umbilical cord that connects Africa to France and Africa to Western nations that colonize us, and they think they have the right, the God-given right to influence what is happening in Africa. And then the point is this, the most aching point is that Africans don't think that they also have the right to influence what happens in the Western world or in Europe or in France. Meanwhile, you give France all the power to control us, to influence us, to being economically or politically or in whatever way that affects the lives of African people. 90% of France's GDP comes from Africa. Cut that off, that 90% will go back to African nations. And then you will have more schools, or you have more hospitals, better universities, because the money will be staying in Africa. But so long as you allow France to continue to exploit Africans through colonization or neo-colonization or any form of influence over us Africans, then our people will continue to suffer. Our condition will never change. We must fight and kick France out of Africa. This is King Agent. Till next time.